This book was a ride. So far, Sarah J. Maas books haven't included any deaths of major characters, but this book has the death of not one, but two major players. I'm so excited to jump into this book. In this episode, we will be discussing plot, characterization, and themes, and then at the end, we'll talk about some questions that I hope that are answered in book 2. So here we go. Let's start with the plot. It's hard to say which was the main conflict because there appear to be two main conflicts. However, I think the central question is, who is Danica? Now you could say that the central conflict was the hunt for the horn and the demon hunting, but at the center of everything is Danica. So the exposition of this book is absolutely heartbreaking. Maas kills one of the coolest characters she's ever written in the first 50 pages. This is heartbreaking, but also ingenious. It's a great use of pathos to engage the reader and helps us empathize with Bryce. It also engages the reader's logos because something about this death just doesn't feel right. Now, there's a lot of building action in this book. Bryce and Hunt are searching for the horn. Rune and his friends join in, meeting characters like Ethan, the Serpent Queen, and Therion. Also, Bryce's friend Fury and Juniper, which, P.S., love that name for a fawn. There is so much building action to cover, but I think that the pacing of these events is perfect. We're given tidbits of information about Danica, terrifying action scenes with the Crystallos demons, and a few tasteful, spicy scenes. Even though it's a long book, Maas keeps us engaged with subplots such as tracking down the synth and dealing with the Viper Queen. So let's move to the climax. And in proper Maas fashion, this one is a doozy. Now you would think that the climax of this book is when Bryce fights Micah, which is such an amazing fight. In that fight, we lose Layla, which was so sad when she sacrifices herself for Bryce. However, in her fight with Micah, Micah uses synth on Bryce to awaken the horn and open the gates to the underworld. So even though she took out an archangel, she thought her fight was over, but not so much. She then has to take to the streets to help save the people. She helps save Ethan and gains points with the wolves. And while doing all of this, Fury and Hunt are in a helicopter coming to save Bryce. Now Bryce is doing that all while she is mortal. She hasn't made the drop. That brings us to the most beautiful part of this whole book. Bryce is running low on batteries and she needs to make the drop to close the gates. This is normally done in a nice little facility and someone helps you and they hold your hand through the drop, but Bryce is desperate. So she holds onto the rails that help communicate through the whole city. And who answers her call but her best friend, Danica? Such a beautiful moment, since they planned on doing the drop together. I cried buckets of tears as she and Danica made the drop, and Danica coaches her through it. Then she closes the portal, and Hunt saves her from total bomb annihilation. Man, if there was ever an epic ending, it's this one. The resolution gave us a look into what Bryce and Hunt's life will be like together, but leaves us with so many unanswered questions. The park scene with Adius and Jezebel is very important to understanding Book 2, or possibly where Book 3 is going. We learn about Bryce's light. We know that Rune has this, but that's all we know. The second hint is that Hunt has a father, and we don't know who he is. Is he a demon? I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So let's jump into character analysis, starting with Bryce Quinlan. From the beginning of the book to the end, Bryce goes from a party girl without a care to one of the most powerful beings in her universe. So you could definitely argue that Bryce is a dynamic character. This story arc makes Bryce Quinlan my new favorite SJM heroine. She's brave, she's feisty, and she's worthy of our adoration. Now, Maas has given Bryce many layers. First, her childhood. Being half fae and half human gives her a chip on her shoulder, because she doesn't really fit in with either group. Also, her biological father is the king of the Fae, so not only is he powerful, but he's a complete ass. Her mother balances this out because she teaches Bryce how to navigate the world and see it through a different lens. Considering that she is SJM's only mother character so far, she's amazing. I really hope to see more mother-daughter dynamics in this book and the books in the future. Also, as part of royal Fae culture, Bryce receives a reading from an oracle. This gives her a complex, since the oracle clouded out her eyes upon seeing Bryce. This makes the ending of the book make more sense, since Bryce is literal light. However, I think Bryce's most important growth comes from figuring out who she is now that Danica is gone. Danica was such an important piece of Bryce's life, and losing that and Connor was soul-crushing. It makes sense that in the 3 years after losing Danica that Bryce hasn't made much forward progress in her life. Looking for the horn gets her using her hard-earned detective skills and connections to help her find what she really needed, peace with Danica's death. Now, even though at the end of the book, Bryce is still questioning who Danica really was, Bryce is able to heal. She's also able to make new connections with Hunt, the night nurse, Ethan, as well as with her brother Brune, and these make her see that there's something still worth fighting for in this life. I'm excited to see Bryce sit up into her role as the Lightbringer. Her and Hunt are going to be unstoppable. Hunt, to me, is a pretty static character. He has some character growth at the end of the novel, but I assume we'll see more character development with Hunt and a deeper dive into his history in the second novel, maybe the third. Now, Hunt and Bryce. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure that SJM can write anything but enemies to lovers. If you can name a non-enemies to lovers relationship in her books, I will give you a gold star or maybe $100 because you know the universe way better than I do. However, I really love Hunt and Bryce together. They are strong, and Hunt helps Bryce to overcome much of her trauma. I'm glad that Mass has declared them endgame because they are perfect, and I'm going to talk more about them when we discuss themes. Moving on to one of my favorite characters in the whole book, Danica Fendir. Danica is such a cool character. However, what do we really know about her? Here's some facts according to the first book. Danica was one of the strongest wolves that has been maybe ever. She was slated to take her mom's place, and that's why Sabine looked like a great candidate for a horn snatcher. Danica is also sympathetic to the humans. We see that she helps the revolution and steals the horn. It seems like she knows something that Bryce doesn't, maybe a number of things. Now, the most interesting thing we learn about Danica in this book is that she's truly the one responsible for killing the rest of her pack because of her abuse of synth. Now, see, this seems really suspicious, seeing that Juniper told Bryce that Danica said that Bryce should stay away from synth at all costs. Why didn't she listen to her own advice? I feel like there is definitely something we're missing here. We know that Danica is a party girl, but she doesn't have any of the signs of a synthetic. However, this storyline does lead to some tension between Bryce and Sabine, which I loved. So even though Danica has passed, she seems to be a dynamic character because of what we learn about her changes so much from the beginning of this book to the end. Rune. I love Rune Danon. He's probably my favorite male written yet. I hope that this is true in the next book. He's such a great comic relief in this story, and also I love the connection between him and Bryce. He has no real reason to be nice to her other than she's his sister. I mean, his father is not nice to her, so why should he be? But he is. We also know that he's a starborn Fae, which seems to be important to the narrative. I feel like there's going to be more about these starborn powers in book 2. He and his two friends are ready to help Bryce and Hunt on the quest for the horn, and while each of them is important to the Fae, they are all a bit rebellious. Maybe it's because they're young, or maybe it's because they're excited for change. I'm really hoping for more character development from Rune in the next book, but as of right now, he seems to be a pretty static character. So let's move to themes. Danica and Bryce's friendship is the pillar of this book, but there are multiple types of friendships explored in the book. First of all, there's Bryce and Juniper. Bryce seems to have pushed many of her friends away, but Juniper is always there for her. Her loyalty and friendship ultimately help save Bryce, and I'm sure she has saved Bryce's life multiple times. There's also Bryce and Laylaba, the friendship that's more of a co-worker situation, but it's clear that Laylaba has become family to Bryce when she finds out that Bryce has brought her freedom. Also, Laylaba sacrifices her life for Bryce, and this shows the best loyalty. Such a touching moment. Here's a quote that shows this. I'm a descendant of Ranthia Dral, Queen of Embers. She's with me now, and I am not afraid. My friends are behind me, and I will protect them. I love that last part. My friends are behind me, and I will protect them. This moment proves that all lives are important, even the small ones. The ultimate show of friendship for me in this novel is when Danica completes the drop with Bryce. This moment is the moment I didn't know I needed. It was beautifully written and inspiring. I tried to find a quote that jumped out, just one that captured my feelings in this moment, but there's not a good one. For me, in this moment, everything comes full circle. We see the young woman that Bryce started as, and we see the mask she wears fade away as her and Danica race back to the top from her drop. I think there are so many lessons that we could take away about friendship in this book. But for me, the number one takeaway is that your friend should be willing to do anything for you, and that true friends become your family. I'm excited to see more about Bryce and Danica's friendship in book 2. The next topic I would like to discuss is freedom. There are so many characters in this book that are enslaved, but there are two I'd like to focus on, and they are Hunt and Laylaba. Now, because of Hunt's crown, I feel like we are yet to see his true potential. So I'm really excited that the crown is gone now. So let's dive into Hunt a little bit more. Hunt was a rebel. He was enslaved by the system for his rebellion, which I know he is deeply hurt by, and I'm excited to see. I'm really hoping there's more backstory on this. Now let's talk about Laylaba and her freedom. Here's a scene I'd like to discuss. Bryce sobbed, I bought you, and now I set you free, Laylaba. Laylaba's smile didn't falter. I know, she said. I peeked in your drawer. And despite the monster trying to break loose behind them, Bryce choked a laugh before she begged. You're a free person. You don't have to do this. You're free, Laylaba. Yet Laylaba remained at the foot of the stairs. Then let it be known that my first act of freedom was to help my friends. So sweet. I think in this moment that we can see that Mass is trying to teach us about freedom. I don't think she's making a deeper social commentary about slavery, but more reminding us that our freedom isn't something we should take for granted. That being free to make your own choices is the most important freedom that we have. Moving on to the next topic. Bryce is in her 20s in this book, and for all of us who have lived through our 20s, we know that it's a time of self-exploration, and this is no exception for beings that can live forever. As previously mentioned, Bryce doesn't really have a place in this world since she's not full fae or full human. Bryce has found a home with Danica and her pack, and when they are rudely ripped away from her, Bryce has to re-find her purpose and herself. At the beginning, she's working a job she doesn't love, avoiding the people that she used to love and the things that she used to love. And it's clear that she's lost. From this quote at the ending, Fury didn't stop her prep. Bryce was a ghost for a long time, Hunt. She pretended she wasn't, but she was. The helicopter finally pulled into the air. You brought her back to life. End quote. I just love this. You can see that Bryce and Hunt's relationship was able to open Bryce up again. Though it's possible to find yourself without a partner or a friend, it's always nice to see yourself through someone else's eyes. To have someone else bring the best in you and give you purpose. And that's what Bryce and Hunt do for each other. I also love that even though Bryce lost herself for a minute, she never really gave up who she was at her core. This is clear from this quote. There's nothing wrong with a party girl. I don't get why the world thinks there is. It's easier for me. When people assume the worst about what I am, it lets me see who they really are. Bryce is confident enough in who she is that she isn't afraid of people thinking the worst of her. She isn't motivated by what other people say about her, and she's unabashedly herself. That's what makes her such a compelling character. I think what Mass wants us to take away from this book about self-discovery and identity is that it's tied to love. And I'm going to talk more about this when I talk about love. But I think we learn a lot about finding yourself from this quote. Look towards where it hurts the most. That's always where the answers are. True change is hard. With the help of those you love, you can find your purpose again. The last topic I'd like to talk about is love. There are so many different types of love in this book. There's familial love, friendship, and romantic love. I feel like I've covered friendship already, so I'd like to focus on families, and of course we'll finish up with Bryce and Hunt. No one's family is perfect, and Bryce is no exception. However, she seems to have a great relationship with her mother and her human family, but her fey family is a little complicated, especially her father. However, Rune is an awesome brother to her, though it does feel like there's been some distance between them lately, just like with Bryce and everyone else. However, them working together on this horn case brings them back together and makes them realize how much they need each other. Bryce also finds family in the people around her. She has her chimera, her friends, and eventually Hunt. These people are so supportive of her, and even though she's messy, I am not sure if there's an overall take-home from this, but I think it's important that you understand that you can find family in the people that you love, even if they're not your birth family. So now for the main event, let's talk about romantic love with Bryce and Hunt. Now, what I love about Bryce and Hunt is that they are so genuine. They make each other happy and they build each other up. It's always good to see a healthy and supportive relationship in a romantasy series because you don't always get that. Here are some of my favorite quotes that highlight this relationship. I see you, Quinlan, he silently conveyed to her, and I like all of it. Right back at you, her half smile seemed to say. Here's a second quote. Only sorrow lay there, something like understanding, like she saw him, as he'd seen her in the shooting gallery, marked every broken shard and didn't mind the jagged bits. The angel's gaze met hers, soul full of agony. She thought it was what her soul must look like. Both of these characters have been to hell with one L and back, and they're both trying to figure out who they are. I love how they complement each other. I think that Mass is trying to show us through Hunt and Bryce relationships that love can heal you and that true love builds you and your partner. I love how both of these characters grow together, and I look forward to seeing them build each other up in the books to come. So as promised, here are a few questions I have that I hope are answered in book 2. My number 1 question is, why does the Prince of Hell care so much about Bryce? My second question comes from this quote. It's a symbol, and symbols will always wield power of their own. There are so many symbols in this book: bondage and slavery. The horn is a symbol of freedom. It's clear to me that Hunt and Bryce will join the rebellion, but what is the government really up to? There's definitely something suspicious going on there. Is Hypaxia the night nurse? If so, Rune has already made a connection with her, so if they're engaged to be married, That might work out for him. I really hope so. What more will we learn about being starborn? I'm really excited. Starborn powers seem pretty dang awesome, so should be cool. Thanks for listening to this episode of According to Your English Teacher. If you enjoyed this video, you can find me on Instagram. My username is according.to-your-English-teacher. I'm also on Goodreads under Sam Gunther, According to Your English Teacher, but I'm super behind. So you can see what I am reading on either of those places. You can also shoot me an email. My email is atyet33@gmail.com. I would also loved it if you supported this video by leaving me a comment or writing a review for this podcast. Doing so will help people to find me and we can grow our community. I'd like to leave you with my favorite quote from the book. Danica grabbed her hand again. That's the point of it, Bryce, of life. To live, to love, knowing that it might all vanish tomorrow. It makes everything that more precious. Thanks for listening to According to Your English Teacher. This episode was written by me, Sam Gunther, and edited by Dallin Gunther. Please join us next week as we analyze Crescent City 2. And as always, happy reading.